Hello and welcome back to Nature Immersion. Kyle here. Let's further our discussion on native versus exotic alien plants by looking at some of the consequences of filling our ecosystems with the exotics. So this will be a continued reading from Bringing Nature Home. And I want to read from this book because I think Douglas Tallamy says it best. So here we go. Early on in my assault on the aliens in our yard, I noticed a rather striking pattern. The alien plants that were taking over the land all had very little or no leaf damage from insects, while the natives had obviously supplied many insects with food. This was alarming because it suggested a consequence of the alien invasion occurring all over North America that neither I nor anyone else I discovered after checking the scientific literature had considered. If our native insect fauna cannot or will not use alien plants for food, then insect populations in areas with many alien plants will be smaller than insect populations in areas with all natives. This may sound like a gardener's dream, a land without insects. But because so many animals depend partially or entirely on insect protein for food, a land without insects is a land without most forms of higher life. But does the pattern of leaf damage I noticed in my backyard hold true? Does it occur elsewhere? If alien plants do reduce insect populations, by how much do they do so? Do aliens exclude all insect herbivores or just some? Are all alien plant species equally harmful to insects? And is the predicted effect on higher levels of the food web as serious as I've suggested? My colleagues and I have started the large controlled research projects needed to address these important questions, and the data are starting to accumulate. So far, the results provide exciting support for gardeners who have already switched to natives or who are enthusiastic about doing so. If my concern for the fate of our insect herbivores turns out to be justified, these gardeners can and will change the world by changing what food is available for their local wildlife. My argument for using native plant species moves beyond debatable values and ethics into the world of scientific fact. We can no longer hope to coexist with other animals if we continue to wage war on their homes and food supplies. This simple tenet provides an imperative, particularly for the bird and butterfly lovers among us, to fight invasive aliens as if it really matters, and to reevaluate our centuries-old love affair with alien ornamentals. Nearly every creature on this planet owes its existence to plants, the only organisms capable of capturing the sun's energy and, through photosynthesis, turning that energy into food for the rest of us. Only in the deepest reaches of the ocean do life forms survive that don't require this food, deriving their energy through chemosynthesis of sulfur from deep sea vents. Plants, therefore, form the first trophic level, the energy that sustains all life. Because animals directly or indirectly depend on plants for their food, the diversity of animals in a particular habitat is very closely linked to the diversity of the plants in that habitat. When there are many species of plants, there are many species of animals. Because plants are so different from one another in their size, shape, habitat, their soil, water, and nutrient requirements, and their leaf chemistry, the most important factor determining taste, greater numbers of plant species means more opportunities for animals to obtain their energy without interfering with one another. That is, plant diversity creates niches to which animals adapt over evolutionary time. This is why we hear so much about the incredible animal diversity of the tropics. There are so many different types of animals in tropical ecosystems because plant diversity is so high there. For example, a single hectare of the Amazonian rainforest in Ecuador can support as many as 473 species of trees, whereas there are only 134 species of trees in all of Pennsylvania. So if we want to create ecosystems with a diversity of animal species, we first have to encourage a healthy diversity of plants. The second trophic level comprises all the animals that eat plants, the herbivores or phytophages. In our neck of the woods, the most familiar and apparent herbivores are white-tailed deer, rabbits, and groundhogs. My wife and I were reminded of the strict herbivory of beavers when one showed up in our neighbor's pond and made meals of their birch and willow trees. Other common vertebrates such as chipmunks, squirrels, mice, raccoons, box turtles, and of course humans include plants in their diets, but are not restricted to them. Many of these omnivorous creatures are relatively large, and most fall into the category of what have been termed charismatic megafauna. It may be a surprise that when it comes to transferring energy from the first trophic level to the predators, parasites, and omnivores and other trophic levels, these charismatic vertebrates are relatively unimportant. What then do most animals in higher trophic levels rely on to pass the energy held within the plants? Insects. I cannot overemphasize how important insect herbivores are to the health of all terrestrial ecosystems. Worldwide, 37% of animal species are herbivorous insects. These species are collectively very good at converting plant tissues of all types to insect tissue, and as a consequence, they also excel at providing food in the form of themselves for other species. In fact, a large percentage of the world's fauna depends entirely on insects to access the energy stored in plants. Birds are a particularly good example of such organisms. If you count all of the terrestrial bird species in North America that rely on insects and other arthropods to feed their young, you would find that figure to be about 96%. In other words, nearly all of them. And no wonder, insects are unusually nutritious. Pound for pound, most insect species contain more protein than beef, and their bodies are extremely high in valuable energy. The Pulitzer Prize-winning author and renowned ecologist E.O. Wilson has called insects the little things that run the world, in part because of their role in transferring energy from plants to other animals that cannot eat plants directly. In sum, if we want to have members of higher trophic levels in our managed ecosystems, we must also have their primary food source, insects. It is increasingly clear, as we shall see, that much of our wildlife will not be able to survive unless food, shelter, and nest sites can be found in suburban habitats. Let's focus on the first of these essential resources, food. Because food for all animals starts with the energy harnessed by plants, the plants we grow in our gardens have the critical role of sustaining, directly or indirectly, all of the animals with which we share our living spaces. The degree to which the plants in our gardens succeed in this regard will determine the diversity and numbers of wildlife that can survive and manage landscapes. And because it is we who decide what plants will grow in our gardens, the responsibility for our nation's biodiversity lies largely with us. Which animals will make it and which will not. We help make this decision every time we plant or remove something from our yards. Unfortunately, because we have been so slow to recognize the unprecedented importance of suburban gardens for the preservation of wildlife, gardeners across the nation have been caught off guard. We have proceeded with garden design as we always have, with no knowledge of the new role our gardens play, and alas, it shows. All too often, the first step in the suburbanization of an area is to bulldoze the plant assemblages native to our neighborhoods and then replace them with large manicured lawns bordered by a relatively few species of popular ornamentals from other continents. Throughout suburbia, we have decimated the native plant diversity that historically supported our favorite birds and mammals.